In the early 1970s, theater chain owner Steve Manassian went from exhibitor to distributor to producer. He collaborated with Sean S. Cunningham on the softcore mockumentary Together, which was released in 1971. A short time later, Manassian was in Germany looking at foreign films to distribute in America. A friend had recommended a company called Atlas International, and while he was there, he saw 6 films. The standout one was called Hexen, or Mark of the Devil. Before watching it, the president of Atlas, Dieter Mentz, told him he could only watch the film if he had a strong stomach. Manassian was no rookie when it came to horror films, and had seen just about everything. Even still, Mark of the Devil was a tough sit for him. It was one of the most disgustingly violent films he'd seen. A few days later, he couldn't stop thinking about the movie, and flew back to Germany to buy the rights to distribute in America. While on the plane, he saw a vomit bag on the seat in front of him. Just then, a light bulb went off. He knew simply saying the film was violent wouldn't drive audiences to see the film. He thought it would need a gimmick. The film was so violent that some audience members might throw up, so he thought that with each ticket sold, you'd get a vomit bag. He bought the American rights to the film and spent $200,000 on vomit bags. With his gimmick, the film was a huge success. Looking at the changes going on in movies at the time, Manassian decided to focus all of his attention towards horror movies. He said horror was the easiest genre to get into, especially when working with a low budget. He said it's easier to scare someone than to make them laugh. During that time, a young unknown director named Wes Craven worked with Cunningham to write a script called Krugen Company. It was about a gang that tortures and kills 2 teenage girls and the parents that get the revenge. Taking a cue from Mark of the Devil, they made the film as brutal as possible, which, unbeknownst to them at the time, would start a new trend in no-holds-barred exploitation horror. They had test screenings under the title Krugen Company, and its performance was very underwhelming. Cunningham and Craven tried to retitle the film to Sex Crime of the Century, but it had about the same result. They spoke to Manassian, who retitled the film to Last House on the Left and came up with the tagline,
"To avoid fainting, keep repeating to yourself, it's only a movie. Only a movie. Only a movie. Only a movie."
The movie went on to be an exploitation phenomenon and kickstarted Craven's career in horror. Manassian used the "it's only a movie" line in future ad campaigns, notably for his don't films, Don't Look in the Basement and Don't Open the Window. Manassian rejoined with Cunningham and helped to provide some of the financing for the original Friday the 13th. In 1981, Manassian started working with producer Dick Randall on the Spanish-American co-production Jigsaw, which was renamed Pieces. They added the tagline, "It's exactly what you think it is." Randall was also known for specializing in trashy low-budget exploitation films, like Crocodile, For Your Height Only, and Extraterrestrial Visitors, better now known as Pod People. Randall moved to London, where he frequently worked with classic English actor Edmund Purdom. Seeing the success of the Friday the 13th series, Manassian wanted to make 2 holiday-themed horror films, one based around April Fool's Day, called April Fool's Day, and another that revolved around Christmas. He wanted to add this one to his Don't catalog, so it was titled Don't Open Till Christmas. The gimmick for this one was that it was about a killer who was targeting people dressed up like Santa. April Fool's Day was supposed to be released on April 1st, 1985, but due to Paramount acquiring the name first, they had to delay the film and released it as Slaughter High in 1986. Anyway, going back to 1982, Manassian and Randall were working on Don't Open Till Christmas. Randall was talking to Purdom and asked him to star in the film. Purdom said he would, but on one condition, that he also direct. Purdom had a fascination with horror for an unusual reason. One of his wives tried to kill him. One day after returning home from a long day of filming, he wanted to take a bath. He went in the bathroom and his wife was already in there and had the hot water running, which filled the room with steam. Not being able to see, he got in the tub and at the last minute, noticed she had placed her plugged-in hairdryer in the soap dish. The event changed his perspective and made him take on roles in films like Pieces and Absurd. He wanted to direct Don't Open Till Christmas since he had never done so before and was hoping to move his career in that direction. Little did he know the entire production would become a major disaster. Randall wanted this film, like many of his other productions, to be sleazy. While Purdom was not against this, he did star in Pieces and Absurd. He was trying to make this lean slightly more in the classy direction. The cast was mostly British TV actors or actors from other exploitation films. Jerry Sundquist, who played Cliff, was in the TV series Soldier and Me, and The Malins. Belinda Main, who played Kate, was in A Man Called Intrepid, as well as a few movies like Night Kill and Alien 2 on Earth. Mark Jones, who played Detective Sergeant Powell, was on Doctor Who, Z-Cars, and was an Imperial officer in The Empire Strikes Back. Pat Astley played the model Sharon. She moved to London in the early 1970s to become an actress. However, without steady work, she made Blue movies, which was short, hardcore porn. She was able to get out of that industry and started starring in softcore sex comedies until landing the job as a recurring role in the popular series Are You Being Served? Unfortunately, a tabloid paper revealed her blue past and she was fired from the show. She returned to working as an extra in sex comedies like Rosie Dixon Night Nurse, until eventually getting the role in Don't Open Till Christmas. While the role was larger than some of her previous films, it still required her to be undressed for most of her screen time. Alan Lake was hired to play Giles. He also starred in Doctor Who and Z-Cars. They started filming in December of 1982 with the hopes of having it in theaters by 1983. They filmed in various locations around London on a relatively small budget. In the movie, Cliff was a busker or street musician. In the original script, he was supposed to play the guitar, but there were too many around, so they switched to the flute. He couldn't play, so they just added the flute noises in post. The actor who gets burned alive was hired for 1 day. After putting on his makeup and doing the scene, his agent called the producers furious. They'd hired the actor for 1 day, but it took 3.5 days for him to get the makeup off. He insisted that he be paid for his time. They didn't, but they were able to work something out. Right away, Purdom was butting heads with the producers. They weren't happy with the direction of the film, which made things go on for much longer than they should have. Filming started in winter, and here it was, summer, and they were still going. Actors were trying to act cold while they were sweating, wearing layers of clothes. As filming continued to drag on, Purdom quit the production. The film's writer, Derek Ford, stepped up to direct, but was fired after 2 days. Seeing that the film needed a lot of work, they then hired Ray Selfie to direct, and Alan Birkinshaw to rewrite the script. Selfie was the uncredited director for Emmanuel in Soho, and the producer for the 4 Dimensions of Greta, so he was already experienced in exploitation. Since some of the actors they hired had moved on to other productions, many of the scenes they shot had to be reshot. They wanted Birkinshaw to write more Santa deaths for the film to make it more violent than it originally was. They shot scenes that weren't tied to the rest of the film so they could insert them in anywhere and it wouldn't seem out of place. They needed to get some Santa fodder and they needed them fast. To get the Santa extras, they had a simple tactic. They sent pretty girls to the local pubs and asked the patrons. For the Santa who gets shot, he was sitting in a pub when a girl from the studio came up and said, "How'd you like your head blown off for money?" They sent a crew member to the butcher store to get chicken entrails and sheep's eyes they could use for the film. So when the one Santa has his eye gouged out with a broken bottle, it's a sheep's eye. For the gore, they used animal livers and other organs. They reshot numerous scenes in the film. The scene with the Santa going to the stripper was shot with 2 actors, by Purdom. Then they replaced the Santa. Then, much later, they went to reshoot it, but they couldn't get the original actors back, so they hired new ones. With the original girl out, they hired Kelly Baker to be the new final girl, who was never even given a name. She was simply the experienced girl. They brought Baker over from the other film the studio was working on, Slaughter High. Some scenes were cut entirely. There was one where Santa gets electrocuted, and the whole set caught fire. They weren't allowed to film there any longer because they almost burned the whole set down. They reshot the segment in the London dungeon because the original wasn't gory enough. The London dungeon was furious with the film crew. They didn't like the way they worked in the location and had banned any future productions from being able to film there. With Purdom out, they had to rewrite the ending, since he was supposed to have a large part in the finale. With all the shooting and reshooting, the film was still coming up short. They needed to fill out the runtime, so they brought in Carolyn Monroe to shoot a song and dance number for the film. Monroe was also just working on Slaughter High. They brought her in for 1 day where she performed this song. She said it was the first time she ever sang on stage. Towards the end of production, Purdom returned and finished the film. They went back to the original ending, where he gets a package, which blows up and kills him. In the end, what was meant to be a quick, low-budget production took over a year to film. While working in post, they had very little money left, so they had to cut corners by doing things like reusing sound effects. After all was said and done, it took about 2 years to finish the film and get it into theaters. Dick Randall wanted to do something to promote the movie, so he put together an hour-long special called The Making of a Horror Film. It's a sort of behind-the-scenes production that, oddly, doesn't present the film in the best light. They talk about some of the production problems, and it makes Randall look like kind of a buffoon, which I guess was intentional.
Well, that's it, Dick. What do you think? Dick? Big snuff. Dick? Can't win them all.
The aftermath of the film was plagued with tragedy. In May of 1984, Alan Lake's wife, Deanna Dors, died of ovarian cancer. On October 10th, which was the anniversary of the day they met, Lake committed suicide. Don't Open Till Christmas was released in December of 1984, 2 months after his death. Don't Open Till Christmas was Jerry Sundquist's last movie. He did have a small run on the show Gems, but he became addicted to heroin and was often without work, which led to him being homeless. On August 1st, 1993, he committed suicide by jumping in front of a train. Pat Astley was frustrated with the direction her career had gone, so she retired to a very private life in Lancashire. The movie was such a mess for Purdom that he never wanted to direct again. He continued acting until 2001, with his last film being the Italian-produced The Knights of the Quest. He died of heart failure on January 1st, 2009 in Rome. With all the effort that went into the film, it was released, flopped, and was promptly forgotten. To continue with his don't movies, Manassian produced a documentary, Don't Scream, It's Only a Movie, which was produced in 1985 but not released until 1989. It's a history of horror filled with public domain footage and archival footage from Manassian and Randall. Speaking of public domain, sometime in either the late 90s or the early 2000s, Don't Open Till Christmas went public domain, which led to numerous distributors to release VHS rips of the film onto DVD. There were also a few different cuts floating out there, one with many of the scenes out of order. One had the bathroom penis removal sequence shown towards the beginning. In 2016, the movie surprisingly got a Blu-ray release in Spain, which I immediately purchased and have been saving for just this time of year. They cleaned up the footage, and it's in the original aspect ratio, so this is the best the film has looked in decades. Don't Open Till Christmas is a sleazy, trashy Christmas slasher movie. Because of the rewrites and reshoots, the film doesn't entirely explain itself. They threw together a bit towards the end, but all it serves to do is further confuse the audience. The original concept was that Harris grew up to be a police inspector, and his brother Giles went mad and was put in an asylum. Wanting to bond with his brother, he escapes the institution and begins to murder people dressed up as Santa, as a way to give his brother a real case to solve. The movie had a mean streak a mile wide. There were 14 people killed, one of them being Kate, who you would think would have survived since she was the one who saw her father die in the beginning. It strangely ends up being the stripper, or experienced girl, since Giles decided not to kill her for some reason, and instead takes her hostage, although she may have still died. At the end, after Giles falls down the staircase, he grabs her, and then it cuts to Harris opening his Christmas present. Despite all that, it still manages to harness a very real Christmas vibe, and for me, it's one of the more memorable Christmas horror movies. I may be biased since this is the film that pretty much launched what would eventually become my career. All the way back in 2010 when I started making videos, this was the first movie I covered on a site called Blip TV, which was a competitor to YouTube. It's since gone out of business, so you can't see that video anymore. However, after the credits of this video, I'm putting the original up for you to enjoy if you wish. You can see how far I've come as a creator in the past 10 years. I did have to edit it slightly for YouTube to avoid some music copyright issues, but in general, it's the same video you would have seen all the way back then. Anyway, back to the movie. Don't Open Till Christmas is a wonderful mess. While watching it, it breezes by, but when you think about it, you realize just how messed up it is, and how it doesn't make too much sense. Inspector Harris, the star of the movie, and the person spearheading the investigations, disappears for most of the movie with nothing more than a half-hearted explanation. The movie's very mean-spirited, showing how one kid went crazy and goes on a murderous rampage for reasons that aren't discussed during the actual movie. Most people would probably ignore this movie, and that was one of the reasons I wanted to highlight it. I think it's a film that somehow succeeds in spite of all its hardships and flaws. In a way, isn't that what we're all rooting for with ourselves? I think it perfectly encapsulates what this channel's about. A movie that most would consider bad, but I think has some redeeming qualities that would make it good, or at the very least, you can look at the production from the perspective of everything it went through to be made. It's not for everybody, might not even be for most people, but it's good enough for me. Love it or hate it, it's still a better movie than the Santa Claus. Yes, I brought that one up again. Merry Christmas, everyone!
It is similar to the one from Alice Sweet Alice, but the grin in this looks so much more menacing. Can you imagine coming around a corner and seeing this? Although I will say, the more I look at it, it does kind of remind me of, well, this. So, is this the best Christmas horror film ever? No. That goes to Black Christmas. The original Black Christmas. Although I will say, I did watch the remake, and I hated it the first time I saw it. But then, 2 days later, it's all I could think about. I went online and found the original screenplay and read that. I even went so far as to track down a copy of the hard-to-find Blu-ray release. I'm kind of funny that way. Despite all the film's problems and loss of identity due to all the changes, I still really enjoyed it. If you're looking for an alternative Christmas movie, you could certainly do a lot worse. Even worse. Oh God, worse. Oh shit, that's just terrible.